right, how y'all doing this evening? Oh, that wasn't too bad. All right, if you would stand, hope y'all are ready to worship. We're going to sing us some Jesus songs. I want you to sing it out. Y'all know these songs? Let me hear you sing them.
There is a name I love to hear, I love to sing its word. It sounds like music in my ear, the sweetest name on earth. Singing, oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, love me.
Amen. All right, you may be seated.
All right, good evening. I'm glad you're here tonight, as always. Otherwise, I would just be preaching to the praise team there. Not that they don't need it. No, I enjoyed that. That was a blessing. That was beautiful. Exodus chapter 15, if you would turn there, we're going to look at chapter 15 and 16 tonight in our Bible study. If you're watching online, we are doing a survey of the Old Testament. I call it that. That is, we are surveying the Old Testament from the beginning of Genesis all the way to the end of Malachi. We want to look at kind of a bird's eye view of the Old Testament. That's what I'm trying to do. That's why we try to move a couple of chapters per week. Now, I'll warn you right off, this is a fair amount of reading material tonight in order to get through 2 chapters. The good news is they're really good chapters. I think you'll find them very interesting. The Old Testament as a whole is a narrative. Not all of it, but most of it is a narrative that it tells a story, historical stories that actually happened. And so we'll get to see some of these stories tonight. If you remember, we are watching the Israelites as they have now been delivered out of the hands of bondage. They have come to the Red Sea. They immediately started complaining. And you know what? Oh, my goodness. I got a map for you guys, and then I forgot to put it in the computer. Chris, while you're back there, I know you don't have anything to do. Find me a map of the Exodus, okay? All right, no pressure. And so that brings us to Exodus 15. They've come to the Red Sea. They've complained. God has brought them through the Red Sea. And I told you Sunday as well as last week, once they crossed the Red Sea, God wanted to take care of some things very quickly. But tonight we're going to see their response, or what they're going to do after completing the crossing of the Red Sea. What you're going to see, or what we're going to read, you have to remember is right after them looking out and seeing all those dead Egyptian soldiers, and we'll go from there. We're going to begin with a hymn of praise. It is a hymn of praise. We're not going to sing it, but we are going to read it. It's in 4 stanzas in chapter 15. God's victory is announced, is the first stanza. God's weapons are described, that's the second stanza. God's character is extolled, that's the third stanza. And God's promises are fulfilled, that is the fourth stanza. All right, 4 stanzas, here we go. Then Moses and the Israelites sang this song to the Lord. I will sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. The horse and its rider he has hurled into the sea. The Lord is my strength and my song. He has become my salvation. He is my God, and I will praise him. My father's God, and I will extol him. The Lord is a warrior. The Lord is his name. Pharaoh's chariots and his army he has hurled into the sea. The best of Pharaoh's officers are drowned in the Red Sea. The deep waters have covered them. They sank to the depths like a stone. Your right hand, O Lord, was majestic in power. Your right hand, O Lord, shattered the enemy. In the greatness of your majesty, you threw down those who opposed you. You unleashed your burning anger. It consumed them like stubble. By the blast of your nostrils, the waters piled up. The surging waters stood firm like a wall. The deep waters congealed in the heart of the sea. The enemy boasted, I will pursue. I will overtake them. I will divide the spoils. I will gorge myself on them. I will draw my sword, and my hand will destroy them. But you blew with your breath, and the sea covered them. They sank like lead in the mighty waters. Who among the gods is like you, O Lord? Who is like you? Majestic in holiness, awesome in glory, working wonders. You stretched out your right hand, and the earth swallowed them. In your unfailing love, you will lead the people you have redeemed. In your strength, you will guide them to your holy dwelling. The nations will hear and tremble, anguish and grip the people of Philistia. The chiefs of Edom will be terrified. The leaders of Moab will be seized with trembling. The people of Canaan will melt away. Terror and dread will fall upon them. By the power of your arm, they will be as still as stone until your people pass by, O Lord, until the people you bought pass by. You will bring them in and plant them on the mountain of your inheritance, the place, O Lord, you made for your dwelling, the sanctuary, O Lord, your hands established. The Lord will reign forever and ever. When Pharaoh's horses, chariots, and horsemen went into the sea, the Lord brought the waters of the sea back over them. But the Israelites walked through the sea on dry ground. Then Miriam, the prophetess, Aaron's sister, took a tambourine in her hand, and all the women followed her with tambourines and dancing. Miriam sang to them, "Sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. The horse and its rider he has hurled into the sea." Now this tells us, if nothing else, that when God brings us through great difficulty, celebrate. I don't know how long it took them or Moses to write that song, but it had to have been more than just a few minutes. There's a tremendous amount of thought that's gone into that. But you see, not only was he doing his thing or just writing, the others are involved. It says as soon as they got over the sea, Miriam took a tambourine and she started dancing. I see a parade, and then the other ladies followed in behind her, all with tambourines. And so they're celebrating. Not only is it great to be able to celebrate when God does good things, I think it's expected. It would have been horribly inappropriate for them to not do this. If they went across the Red Sea, they looked back at all the enemy on the shore, realizing this has been the most incredible miracle in history to this point, and they say, "Oh, that was nice," and then they just walk off. You know, there is a point when it is important to celebrate what God does. I also think that if we don't celebrate what God does, and by the way, God does great things today. You may not have parted to see lately, but he does great things just as great, just as frequently. While we like to watch the Red Sea, it is not what we need. It was what they needed then. It is not what we need now. There are other interventions on God's part that we need. And if you watched the debate last night, you understand our world needs an intervention. And so God's hand is in that, and when God's hand moves, we should celebrate. What would happen is, if we don't celebrate, if we just tip our hat and walk off and we don't give God the credit that is due, it is unlikely that God's going to want to intervene the next time. Not that God has an ego or feeds on ego, but he inhabits the praise of his people, and he deserves to have us credit him when he does miracles. So that's exactly what they do. Now, it falls apart immediately. You know, it is the Israelites. But I give them credit for this. They did praise God at this point. Is there anything in that song that you noticed or that stood out to you? Okay, they're very happy. That is unusual for the Israelites. Very happy is not often words that we use to describe the Israelites. That's one thing that we see. You're right. They're happy. And they ought to be happy. They're not dead. Yeah, we'll get to that in just a minute. I told you it doesn't last long. Their spirituality is bipolar. And we're going to see that. Sometimes ours are too. Ours is too. Anything else you notice? There was something in there particular. In the song, it talks about not only what God did, but what he's going to do. Did you notice that? He said, it says that those Philistines are going to be terrified. They ought to be terrified. Word's going to get out, and all of our enemy is going to dwindle before us. You know, that's the description. They're all going to be scared. They ought to be scared once they hear about this. Now, is that true? Did that turn out to be true? Was the enemy scared? Yes, they were mortified, actually, in Jericho. They were terrified. You're right. There are people that fought against them. They mustered their strength. But we're going to find out so many years later when they go to Jericho, the rumor's going around. Oh my, and this 40 years later. Oh my goodness, they're finally here. We're doomed. And so this prediction is accurate. Unfortunately, the Israelites don't maintain this attitude very long at all. When God brings you through great difficulty, celebrate. In Revelation chapter 15, when God's people celebrated victory over Satan, when God's wrath came to completion through the breaking of the 7 seals, the 7 trumpets, and the 7 bowls, the victorious followers of Christ sang a song. Which song did they sing? They sang the song of Moses after he crossed the Red Sea. This is the song that not only was sung thousands of years ago with the Israelites, but will be sung in the future when there's final victory over Satan. Did you know that? Again, from beginning to end, we see God working through history. So when God delivers you from bondage to freedom, celebrate. Verse 22, then Moses led Israel from the Red Sea, and they went into the desert of Shur. For 3 days, they traveled in the desert without finding water. When they came to Marah, they could not drink its water because it was bitter. That's one of the places called Marah. So the people grumbled against Moses, saying, what are we to drink? Now, it is 3 days, and it is millions of people. I don't know how much water, I haven't done the calculations, that it takes to provide water day by day for millions of people, but I can say it's a lot. It's a lot of water. If they came to a small tank, they would literally dry up the tank drinking it. And there's no tank at this point, hardly out in the wilderness, and so they come across one water source, and the water is bitter. Now, we filter our water. It goes through a plant and comes right out of our faucet, so we don't have to encounter this. I can tell you in my wife's country, Cherry, in the Philippines, most of the water most Filipinos drink comes right out of the ground. They wells, or where did you get water? Floor? Stream? A well? Yeah. So however it tastes coming out of the ground, that's how it tasted when they drank it. And that's the way it has been for most of history, for most of the world. You and I live in an unusual time. And so they found this one water source, and it was bitter. God tests us to encourage spiritual growth and to bring out the best in us. But the devil will tempt us to bring out the worst in us. So here's an opportunity after 3 days to trust God or to give in to fear. And immediately, their high of going across the Red Sea has now become a low without water. Verse 25, then Moses cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a piece of wood. He threw it into the water, and the water became sweet. There, the Lord made a decree and a law for them, and there he tested them. He said, if you listen carefully to the voice of the Lord your God and do what is right in your eyes, if you pay attention to his commands and keep all of his decrees, I will not bring on you any of the diseases I brought on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you. Then they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs and 70 palm trees, and they camped there near the water. So God provided for them. That's chapter 15 in a nutshell. Any comments before we get to the really fun chapter, which is chapter 16? It's been pretty good so far. They're just 3 days in. You can only mess it up so much in 3 days. But here they go in chapter 16. But any comments or questions about chapter 15? Yeah, that's exactly right. I don't know if they listened or they thought about it, but this is God providing them an opportunity through yet another miracle. And make no mistake, this is a miracle. Now, God could have made the water sweet before they ever got there, but he wanted them to see the miracle. He's trying to help them, grow them into trusting him. And so what does he actually have Moses do? Yeah, there's a piece of wood, throw that in the water. Now, did the wood sweeten the water? That is a miracle. This is not biological. It's not chemical. There was no magic properties. There was no fairy dust on the wood. God just had, he does this. I don't know why, you put mud on your eyes and go wash in the river and you'll be able to see, well, that mud didn't make any difference at all. There were other times when Jesus healed people just immediately. And so sometimes he has us do things, and they're visual reminders to us, and for them, it was a visual thing. Threw it in, and they know wood. They know better than one piece of wood is going to sweeten up a whole pond. And so, but they see the thing happen, and they realize it's a miracle. It was very visual. God tends to do that for us. Anything else? All right, chapter 16, verse 1. The whole Israelite community set out from Elim, and came to the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they had come out of Egypt. In the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. Now, they've been camping. They got all these springs around. They're doing okay. There's palm trees. But it doesn't take very long before the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt." What do they mean by that? Yeah, why didn't you just kill them along with all the Egyptians? This stinks. We're having a bad time. There we sat around pots of meat and ate the foods we wanted, but you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death. Now again, this is just days or a few weeks after the crossing of the Red Sea, after seeing that miracle, and then seeing another miracle of God changing the water, and yet they pretend none of that happened, that it's just all some scheme that Moses or God has come up with to kill them all. It's really dumb. That's a dumb accusation, is that not? To accuse God and accuse Moses of that. Verse 4, then the Lord said to Moses, "I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. In this way I will test them and see whether they will follow my instructions." So what's the instructions? Yeah, it's not that complicated. It's not like those instructions you get when you buy a bookshelf. It's in another language. It's several pages long. It's in microfilm. And this is really easy stuff. You just go out, and there it is. Your part, the Israelites' part, step 1, pick it up. Step 2, just get enough for the day. That's it. That's all they have to do. And so I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day, gather enough for that day. And then he says, this is why he's done it this way. In this way, I will test them to see whether they will follow my instructions. God could have made the manna in a way that it would last 2 days or 3 days or a week. We know that because we know God has that kind of power. If he can make manna out of nothing every day for 40 years, he can make it last as long as he wants. But also when they are gathering on the 6th day, that manna is special. It happens to last an extra day. So it lasts longer than the other manna. So all they have to do, pick up enough for the day, and that's it. And so he's testing. Verse 5, on the sixth day, they are to prepare what they bring in, and that is to be twice as much as they gather on the other days. So Moses said to all the Israelites, "In the evening you will know that it was the Lord who brought you out of Egypt, and in the morning you will see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your grumbling against him. Who are we that you should grumble against us?" Moses also said, "You will know that it was the Lord when he gives you meat to eat in the evening and all the bread you want in the morning, because he has heard your grumbling against him. Who are we? You are not grumbling against us, but against the Lord. So he does want to make it very clear who they're really complaining to and complaining about. And he says, you're really complaining about God. And again, God's patience here is extraordinary. So he tells them, again, exactly what to do. He says, in the morning you'll see the glory of God. Now, one other thing that they're going to get is not just all the bread they can eat in the morning. What else are they going to get? They're going to get quail. It's a quail buffet. So that's what's going to happen. How many of you have ever eaten quail? Yeah, it's pretty good for you non-quail people. It's one of the few wild game birds that I really like, if it's prepared right. Like any game bird, you have to prepare it right. Okay, where was I? I'm sorry, I got distracted. In verse 9, then Moses said to Aaron, say to the entire Israelite community, come before the Lord, for he has heard your grumbling. While Aaron was speaking to the whole Israelite community, they looked toward the desert, and there was the glory of the Lord appearing in the cloud. Now, something has happened to the cloud. Now, you know that the cloud is a cloud by day. It's a pillar or column of cloud during the day and a column or a pillar of fire at night. So they're accustomed to seeing the glory of God to one extent during the day and at night, every day and every night. But something has happened that's different, and they see something different about the pillar that denotes the glory of God. That's verse 10. The Lord said to Moses, I've heard the grumbling of the Israelites. Tell them at twilight you will eat meat, and in the morning you will be filled with bread. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God. So one thing that we need to do in our life that could really, really change our relationship with God is to stop blaming God. You say, well, I don't blame God. Well, that's what the Israelites probably said. You say, I don't blame God. I blame those people that God put here. I blame my spouse that God gave me. That sounds just like who? That was Adam. Remember? That's the first thing he says. Lord, this woman you gave me did this. Amen? Don't answer that. So Moses answered the people and said, who are we? You're not, just to be clear, not grumbling against us, but against God. One thing you note in here, that God is exceptionally merciful. It's a wonder they're all dead at this point. Again, if I were in charge, yeah, they'd be all gone. They wouldn't have had any quail, that's for sure. The Lord said to Moses, in verse 11, verse 12, I've heard the grumbling of the Israelites. Tell them at twilight you'll eat meat, in the morning you'll be filled with bread. Then you'll know that I'm the Lord your God. Verse 13, that evening quail came and covered the camp. And in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp, and when the dew was gone, thin flakes like frost on the ground appeared on the desert floor. When the Israelites saw it, they said to each other, what is it? For they did not know what it was. Now, that evening, quail came and covered the camp. In my vision of what would happen here in the 21st century, if we were out in a camp and the quail cover it, here in Texas at least, that we just run in and grab our shotguns and start firing like crazy. They didn't have any shotguns. I don't know if they had nets to trap them or they just ran out and grabbed them. There were so many quail that they were able to get whatever they needed. Again, for 2 to 3 million people, that's a lot of quail. And quail, again, for those of you who've eaten quail, you know this, it's not like a turkey dinner. They're not that big. And so it takes several to fill you up. So that's a lot of quail. And so this provision was there for them. So when the dew was gone, the next morning, thin flakes like frost on the ground appeared on the desert floor. They didn't know what it was. We call it manna. So maybe you can tell me, what was it? Yeah, it means what is it? Right. Yeah, we've established that. They didn't know, we don't know. So that's a good name for it. What is it? What's that? So what is it? That's what I'm asking you. What is manna? All right, it's Frosted Flakes. I like that. That sounds good. Although 40 years of Frosted Flakes, I don't know. It was God's provision. It definitely was. We don't know. The truth is we don't know. There are a lot of theories about, some things, but the truth is food that you and I can eat doesn't just appear in the dew. Nature doesn't work this way, and so we know that the manna was not a natural phenomenon. Let me give you this example. If a country needs rain desperately, they're in a drought and they pray for rain and God sends rain, that's a miracle, but that is still a naturally occurring phenomenon, the rain. This is not a naturally occurring phenomenon. It's just a phenomenon. It's just a straight up miracle from God that God is producing this, and it's something we just don't see. Having said that, my trusty study Bible here has a little article entitled Manna, What is it? So I'm just going to read it. It's just a paragraph long. Several naturalistic explanations for the manna have been given. For example, some equate it with the sticky and often granular honeydew that is excreted in Sinai in early June by various scale insects and that solidifies rapidly through evaporation. But no naturally occurring substance fills all the data of the text, and several factors suggest that manna was in fact the Lord's unique provision for his people in the wilderness. And he's going to give the reasons. Number one, the meaning of the Hebrew word for manna suggests that it was something unknown to the people at the time. If they knew what it was, even in small quantities that they would seen before, they wouldn't have named it manna. They'd already have a name for it. It suggests they'd never seen anything like that. Two, the appearance and taste of the manna suggests that it is not something experienced by other peoples in other times. In other words, it has not been reproduced elsewhere. Number three, the daily abundance of the manna, and it was abundant, again, feeding millions, and its regular periodic surge and slump, double amounts on the 6th day but none on the 7th day, hardly fit a natural phenomenon. Its availability and ample supply for the entire wilderness experience, no matter where the people were, argues against a natural substance. Number five, the keeping of a sample of the manna in the ark for future generations, we're going to see that, suggests that it was a unique food. So they kept some of it in the Ark of the Covenant just to give evidence. Now, God made manna on the Sabbath, on the 6th day, lasts for 2 days. I wonder how long the manna in the Ark of the Covenant lasts. Is it still there? Is it still good? I don't know. If I'd be curious to look in the Ark. Excuse me. And so they said they didn't know what it was. So this is the last part of verse 15. Moses said to them, "It is the bread the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Each one is to gather as much as he needed. Take an omer for each person you have in your tent." Can you tell me what an omer is? Well, this is why I love the Bible. The Bible tells you what an omer is. If you look over in verse 36, what does it say? An omer is 1/10 of an ephah. So there you go. But I find it interesting that it makes the effort to tell you that. So my study Bible says an omer is about 3 pounds of food. And I'm not sure how they come to that realization. But that's what it is. What verse was I in? All right. 17. The Israelites did as they were told. Some gathered much, some little. And when they measured it by the omer, he who gathered much did not have too much, and he who gathered little did not have too little. Each one gathered as much as he needed. Then Moses said to him, "No one is to keep any of it until morning." However, some of them paid no attention to Moses And they kept part of it until morning, but it was full of maggots and began to smell. So Moses was angry with them. So why was Moses angry with them? Okay, they could not, why would they not follow the instructions? Fearful of, you're right. Well, they're greedy or they're gluttons. No, if it had been us, we just ate it all. You know, there wouldn't have been any left. Okay, here's the thing. They're thinking, okay, Moses got lucky on this one. There's all this magic food around, but I never seen this before. And yeah, and you know, we'll probably have some tomorrow. Good chance, but we might not. You know, how often do you see something like this? We're gonna take a little extra. So I find it almost comical that God put the maggots in it and made it what? Stink. So when you walk throughout the camp, you know who the faithless people are just by the smell coming out of their tent. So there's no getting around it. All right, okay. Verse 21, each morning everyone gathered as much as they needed, and when the sun grew hot, it melted away. On the sixth day, they gathered twice as much, 2 omers for each person, and the leaders of the community came and reported this to Moses. He said to them, this is what the Lord commanded. Tomorrow is to be a day of rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. So bake what you have to bake and boil what you want to boil. Save whatever is left and keep it until morning. Now, we're getting clues throughout this of what manna is or what it's similar to. First of all, Moses himself refers to it as bread. Here we see that you can bake it or what? Boil it, which is interesting in and of itself, that you have a product here, you can bake it or boil it, but that's what they did. And it's verse 24, so they saved it until morning. And by the way, we're going to get a little more description here in a minute. As Moses commanded, and it did not stink or get maggots in it. Eat it today, Moses said, because today is a Sabbath to the Lord. You will not find any of it on the ground today. 6 days you are to gather it, but on the 7th day, the Sabbath, there will not be any. Nevertheless, some of the people went out on the 7th day to gather it, but they found none. They don't follow anything. You know, they're out there, standing out there with their baskets, looking stupid, and they couldn't even follow that instruction, but they found none. It was like an Easter egg hunt, couldn't find any. Then the Lord said to Moses, how long will you refuse to keep my command and my instructions? Bear in mind that the Lord has given you the Sabbath. That is why on the 6th day he gives you bread for 2 days. Everyone is to stay where he is. On the 7th day, no one is to go out. So the people rested on the Sabbath. That's verse 30. Verse 31, the people of Israel called the bread manna. It was white like coriander seed and tasted like, and again, this is our historical reference here. It tasted like wafers made with honey. So honey is not sour or bitter or salty. Honey is sweet. Moses said, this is what the Lord has commanded. Take an omer of manna and keep it for the generations to come so that they can see the bread I gave you to eat in the desert when I brought you out of Egypt. So God does want them to keep some for future generations to see. So, and I always say this when we talk about Exodus, it's sweet bread right out of heaven. So I always picture Krispy Kreme donuts falling out of the sky. So I don't know what it was, but apparently it had a texture to it and it had a sweet taste to it. This isn't something they just imagined or, you know, a tasty leaf or something. It's actual food. Verse 33. So Moses said to Aaron, take a jar and put an omer of manna in it, then place it before the Lord to be kept for the generations to come. As the Lord commanded Moses, Aaron put the manna in front of the testimony, that it might be kept. The Israelites ate manna for 40 years until they came to a land that was settled. They ate manna until they reached the border of Canaan. And then it tells us an omer is 1/10 of an ephah. So there you have it. So what lessons can we learn from this tonight? Lesson number one, they did not want to do what God told them to do. It's simple obedience. It's a simple question of obedience. When God tells us to forgive, to love, when God tells us to be faithful, when God tells us to respect and honor one another, when God tells us to obey our parents. It's a matter of, are we going to do it or are we not going to do it? What I've learned for myself is I'm pretty good at obeying God with certain things and then not so much with other things. And so what I do in my nature, in your nature, I don't focus on the things where I disobey God. I tend to focus on the things where I do obey God, and I say, looky here. And so if that doesn't work, then I look at places where you're not obeying God, and I'll say, looky there. But in the end, it was a simple matter. Are you going to do what God tells you to do? And all these thousands of years later, it is no different. The question in our life, are we going to obey our God or not? Also, as they begin to complain to God, and they incessantly and will continually complain, what is the goal of their complaining? What is it that they want God to do? Or bend to them, what do they want? Well, they want everything, but if you're one of the Israelites, what do you think they wanted? What did they want God to do? All right, you're on the right track. Have what right there right now? Do what? All right, the promised land. They have no interest in the wilderness. They want to go straight from Egypt and wake up the next day in the promised land. Enemy gone, ready to occupy, ready to go. They love the ideal of getting out of the bondage, and they love the ideal of being in a land flowing with milk and honey. They're not so keen on the ideal of in between. Now, you and I spend most of our life in between, as they are going to spend all of their life in between. Why would he not comply with their request or their desire? Why not? It would have been easier for God. Just zip them right up there, straight line. Could have been there in days. Could have been all over. All right, well, they're not ready spiritually. It wouldn't be good for them. What's another reason? I can give you 10. And they don't have the law yet. They have not received the 10 Commandments. You know, there's Sinai between Egypt and Canaan, and that needs to happen not just for them, but for all generations to this very day. We're dependent upon those 10 laws, those 10 Commandments. And so God had plans for them. They just didn't like his plans. They didn't like his way. They wanted it their way. So if you want to overcome the grumbling in your life, I have this one challenge to you tonight. Admit it. Don't say anything right now. But in your heart, to yourself, if you're disobedient to God in areas of your life, you'll never get over it until you admit it. I need to be honest with myself and say to God, God, all right, I'm really stubborn in this area, in this area, in this area. I admit it. I need to work on that. I'm not trusting you like I should. All right? All right, that ends our Bible study for this week. If you will take out your prayer